Hi. So we are just going to do a run through of this whole facts tab. We thought it was really important to just throw in some facts with questions regarding implementing this strategy or test-taking strategies. So, okay. So the first question down below is, who are we talking about here? So our whole research has been, who is this implementing or who does this affect? And ultimately, all test-taking strategies affect all students, and it doesn't even end at high school, but obviously we're not going to talk about that right now. But starting in middle school and high school, tests take up a large portion of students' grades. So test-taking strategies is huge, but if we're implementing them at a younger age, like say 3rd grade, because by 2nd grade, 1st grade, they're not really fluent readers, but by 3rd grade, simple test-taking strategies as far as taking out, the wrong answer or simple things that they can understand at a younger age is gonna really affect them later on in life. So we kind of, this strategy in general was kind of hard to pinpoint a grade for, because it really is kind of an all-over subject matter and should always be touched on at the beginning or throughout the year.
All right, down to the next one. How do students with learning disabilities differ? So what we're trying to get at that is, how do they take test-taking strategies or handle test-taking strategies differently than students without disabilities? And for them, with students with disabilities, it's difficult for them to organize their information. It's hard for them to comprehend. A lot of the times, memory is affected with students with learning disabilities, so it's really hard for them to remember things that are on the test and remember it when they are taking the test. There's a lot of self-doubt that comes with having a disability, and task completion with time limits. So getting the test done within the set amount of time can be extremely hard for students. I mean, even without disabilities too, like that anxiety that gets brought along with that is something that is a big factor. And then test wiseness, which we'll speak to in just a second.
Yeah. So right below that, we talk about, we ask the question, what is time wiseness, you ask?
Test wiseness.
Oh, test wiseness? Did I say task?
I think you said time.
Oh. So what is test wiseness? Wiseness, I'm going to quote, because we found this quote in an article and it pretty much summed it up beautifully. Test wiseness has been defined as the ability to respond adventurously to multiple choice items containing extraneous clues, and therefore to obtain credit without knowledge of the subject matter being tested. So that was really wordy. But basically, the idea of test wiseness is being familiar, not necessarily with the content of the test, so whether it be a math test or a spelling test or a science test, it's more so being familiar with what the questions are asking. And so some of the skills involved that we listed below were time use strategies. So being wise when it comes to using that time that you are allotted. So saying, oh, I'm going to do all the easy questions or the questions that I know first, and then coming back to the hard ones. That's using test wiseness. The next would be guessing strategies. And guessing strategies would be either thinking that there's no way the teacher would have 3 answer C questions in a row, or just being familiar with the way the teacher puts the tests together, I guess, just, and so guessing based on that. And then the last one is deductive reasoning strategies. So having the four, like A, B, C, and D being something completely out of left field and just crossing that out right away. So using your deductive reasoning and saying like, okay, that's not it, and that I don't think that could be it, and then, coming to the answer by just eliminating the ones that aren't. So yeah.
Okay, so going down a little further, what factors go into test taking? So factor number 1 is the time limits, and time limits are obviously very stressful, and honestly I prefer not to have them, but there are reasons for them. And another factor is different forms of responses. So for that, there's like on test we have short answer questions, and we have like essay questions, and then we have multiple choice too. So those are different forms of responses that
True, false.
Yeah, or true, false too, that we have when we have a test. And then there's working independently and reading the directions and reading the questions, and remember the correct responses and write the correct responses.
All factors. And then the last thing that we touched on at the end of this tab is serious problems for test takers. So some students get really anxious, and test anxiety is super real. And we, as teachers, just need to be aware that that is something that affects our students. So if we can prepare them better, then we're possibly eliminating less anxiety or no anxiety at all, hopefully. Carelessness is also a problem for test takers. So, they go into it thinking, oh, well, I don't really care, whatever grade I get is fine.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't necessarily have the I need to have an A mentality, which is not going to help their grade at all.
Also being like careless as in like, oh, I got this too, I don't need to study at all.
Yes.
And just carelessly going into it and thinking we'll get it.
Yeah, totally. Poor use of time. So we did touch on like going into it and doing the ones you know first, right? And then going back to the ones you don't. Well, some students don't have that strategy, and they'll just go, be stuck on a question for so long, and then the time runs out. And then confusion. Whether it's the teacher didn't teach towards that student and give them the information they needed in the way that they needed, or
like the content was stated like in a weird way, or an ununderstandable way, a non-understandable way.
Yeah. Or, they're just confused on maybe even what the test is asking for. So not necessarily like, maybe the question is worded weird, or, so there's a lot of implications that could be serious problems for test takers. And yeah, that's it.